go to my guess. Let me go to my guess. That if that was a comedy sketch, nobody would accept it as real because it was so ludicrous. Shobhan, my man, how you doing, man? You doing okay today?
Hi, Jamal. Good to see you again. Can you hear me? Yeah.
I can hear you just fine. It's good to see you too, man. Always enjoy talking to you. I really do. I always learn something anytime I talk to you. And just for the audience, Shobhan Saxena, he's an Indian journalist based out of Sao Paulo, Brazil, in a career spanning more than 30 years. He has reported for the Times of India, The Hindu, the Indian Express, various other publications in India. Right now, he is an international correspondent for DD India, the international channel for India's public broadcaster. And welcome back to the channel, man. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the SEO summit just ended. There are bilateral meetings that are taking place between pretty much everybody that was there. I think the highlight has been Putin, Modi, Xi Jinping and Modi, Putin, Xi Jinping and Modi holding hands, like walking to Xi Jinping. It's like, no, this is not a photo op. We're just really doing this. And it's just the person gets the perfect shot and it goes around the world. Trump flips out over it, all this good stuff. Give me your take on that before I move on to another story. But I do want to get your take on the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and what does it mean to you that Modi and China have effectively been pushed closer together as a result of the United States effectively going after Modi?
Yeah, look, Jamal, SCO, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, began, I think, almost 30 years ago. And with a very limited mandate of talking about security. It's not an alliance. It's more like an organization, a platform where where China, Russia, and other Central Asian countries could discuss security issues, especially anti-terror activities. Because when it started 30 years ago, there was a lot of problem with terrorism in Central Asia, in Russia too. There have been wars in Chechnya, all that. Everybody knows the story. But today, I think the mandate and the scope of SCO has changed dramatically. It's no longer so about security. They're looking at security in a very wide context, wider context. So that also includes economy, that also includes trade and commercial ties. So SCO basically covers the entire Eurasian landmass, starting from Russia and China, you go to Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Turkey. That's how it's different from other organizations, especially BRICS. BRICS has a similar mandate, but BRICS is a global organization from Russia, China, India to Brazil. It also includes African countries now, like South Africa, Ethiopia, Middle Eastern countries, Iran, Saudi Arabia. And the focus of BRICS have been, finance and economy and more economic cooperation between emerging and developing countries. What we saw in Tianjin this week and past 2 days is basically the SCO and BRICS coming together. I think the driving force behind, with all due respect to Brazil and South Africa, the driving force behind BRICS have been the RIC inside BRICS. This is Russia, India, and China. That's how actually the idea of BRICS started. It was basically a RIC, which became BRIC with the inclusion of Brazil. And then South Africa came on board, it became BRICS, and now it's BRICS Plus. So we see, I think, the three big countries, China, India, and Russia, three of the biggest countries in the world, and China being the second biggest economy, India being the fourth biggest economy, and Russia also in the first 10 economies in the world, and Brazil too. Now we are seeing basically how cooperation between the emerging countries is reaching another level. And we all saw the video of Prime Minister Modi and President Putin and President Xi Jinping together, shaking hands, laughing. They are very good optics, and I think this optics must be giving a lot of heartache to people in Washington and Brussels and European capitals, because actually this is a nightmare scenario for them. Russia, India, and China coming together, and with other important countries like Iran, and Turkey, which is a NATO member. So I think this is, I would say, not just the optics. I think the decisions taken there, the discourse and debate and the talking points tell us then how the world is changing. And the world has been changing for quite some time. We've been talking about the multipolar world, and it has been emerging. Now, it's a fact that, China, India, Russia, Brazil, they are important poles in this multipolar world which is emerging. The West has been, either they've been mocking the organizations like BRICS. Suddenly they woke up to the reality of BRICS. Say, oh wow, uh, this is a very good video. Prime Minister Modi and Putin walking hand in hand and being welcomed by Xi Jinping. I mean, it
Yeah.
just really shows the and then the way they look, they're talking to each other, laughing and smiling, and in the Western media dubs them in a very different light, and but this is a reality because this is their platform. They're talking about their future. You know, Jamal, India and China together almost 3 billion people.
Yep.
India and China just almost 3 billion people. If you include the other South Asian countries, is more than 3 billion. If you include all the SCO countries, more than 25 countries, SCO plus present in China this week, is almost 4 billion people, half the humanity. So these,
Mhm.
they're talking about some very fundamental issues which affects half the humanity. So I think it's a great development. I think SCO has very bright future, just like BRICS. Next this year's BRICS presidency is with Brazil. Next year is going to be in India, the BRICS summit, and President Xi Jinping has already told Prime Minister Modi that he will support India's presidency, and then 2027 is going to be in China, and India will support it. I think so. We are seeing a new phase of cooperation, and of course, this is all happening in the context of the tariff war, which has been launched by the US against almost all the countries. But I won't give too much importance to that because this cooperation, this dialogue has been going on for quite some time between the emerging countries on BRICS platform, on G20 platform, and on SCA platform.
Yes, but it is the tariff war that has been expediting this process. Meaning, there's a lot of people, I'm not saying it's true, I'm just saying there's a lot of people that believe that India was trying to be unaligned. And I think that's fair. I think you would agree with me with that. That India's thing was we don't want to be overly aligned. We want to be able to work with the West. We want to be able to work with the East. We want to be this kind of in between. And, for the most part, there's all sorts of pictures of Modi hugging Trump, these guys having a very good relationship. And Modi seemed to be shocked, like extraordinarily so, when Trump turned around as 50% sanctions. Now, to be fair, Donald Trump had been hitting pretty much the world with sanctions, but he seemed to be particularly vicious going after BRICS countries, whether it was South Africa, whether it was Brazil, whether it was India. He tried to go after China at that one point with 200 and something percent sanctions. They just put the snapback sanctions on Iran, not to mention attacking Iran. There seems to be a very specific focus on going after BRICS. And Donald Trump has even mentioned BRICS in a way that other Democrats haven't, effectively saying they're trying to undercut the dollar. We can't allow that to happen, blah, 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 blah. Him doing this was a radical miscalculation. And apparently Modi stopped taking his phone calls. The president called and Trump, Modi looked at the phone call and went about eating the falafel or whatever he was eating. Give me your take on this. Like, why did Modi respond so harshly to this in a way that other countries just kind of accepted Donald Trump's temper tantrums? I mean, look at Europe. Europe just bent over backwards and accepted whatever Trump effectively went after them with. Many countries just bent the knee. Why was India so aggressively pushing back on this, effectively not accepting what Donald Trump was trying to do in regards to this kind of exertion of American power?
First of all, I think Donald Trump is the first American president who has mentioned BRICS in his
Yes, he has.
discourse. Obama, Biden never spoke about it. But and though he thinks that in BRICS, S stands for Spain. Uh, you know, so that's not South Africa, but it's Spain. But that's okay. Uh, Coming back to the between India and the U.S., I think the Americans and the West in general, I think they don't understand India. They completely miscalculated. They don't understand the Indian psyche. They don't understand the Indian foreign policy, and they don't understand India's engagement with BRICS or other platforms. India has repeatedly said That is not part of any anti-West alliance. It's not anti-American alliance. India's foreign policy for decades have been multi-alignment with all the countries. India has good relations, a strategic partnership with Russia, has very good commercial relations with China, but also India has good relations with European countries, EU and US too. Now it has been a change. I've been reading some of the analysis in CNN and other Western media uh, platform saying that Trump is pushing India's into China's orbit. This is again complete misreading of the Indian history. No, India is not some small country, some small satellite which has to either revolve around the US or revolve around China. You're talking about the biggest country on this planet. It is the most populous country in the world. It is the biggest democracy in the world, and India has a very, very uh, strong history of fighting for its independence from the biggest empire this world had seen, the British Empire. And then if you push that country into a corner, for whatever reasons, I think India is going to, if not going to hit back or retaliate, I think India will take its position uh, in the interest of its people. Now, as far as the trade tariffs between India and US is concerned, I mean, the biggest problem is the buying of Russian oil, because if you look at the Trump administration has been using different excuses against different countries. Against Brazil, the argument is you're persecuting Jair Bolsonaro, so we put in tariffs on you. What is
Yes.
the prosecution of Jair Bolsonaro got to do with international trade? It's bizarre, right? Then you say against South Africa, they say the white minority that is being persecuted. I mean, you have no notion of history of Africa and South Africa to talk like that. And same thing with India. What the Americans, the bone of contention between India and US is on this tariff issue. The US has been pushing India to open its agriculture market and dairy market. That is out of the question. More than 60% of the Indian population, more than 60%, 65% of the Indian population is directly or indirectly involved in agriculture and dairy. They depend on it. It's not a great part of, it's almost 20% of the Indian economy, but if you take it, the population, it's really big. No Indian government will ever open its market for foreign producers in these sectors. They can't do it. They won't survive it. And the Prime Minister Modi, he said it publicly. He said, I may have to pay, I'm paraphrasing, I may have to pay a cost for it, but I will always protect the interest of our farmers. India is known as a country of farmers. So that is the main bone of contention. There have been several rounds of talks between India and US in Washington. The Americans are supposed to go to Delhi. They didn't go. And they
Mhm.
discussed, India said, no, we are not going to open dairy products and agriculture products. Forget it. And that's why first they put 25%. And then again, the excuse of Russian oil is just an excuse. And now it has taken a bizarre turn, and the kind of language people like Peter Navarro are using on Fox News and writing articles and in Financial Times, saying now we're using casteist terms like Brahmins are making money and things like that. This is bizarre, and they're not helping anyone. They're not helping themselves by using this kind of language, because there's a limit to which Indians will take it. After a point, there could be I don't know how the government will react, but there could be retaliation. I can tell you the mood in India, because I'm watching on the social media and the commentary in television and newspapers. The mood in India is very different right now. And I won't say that people are up in arms against America, but people are not liking it. You know, uh, India and US have always had, for almost 3 decades, more than 3 decades, good relations, strategic partnership, Quad, and all that. There's no need to go down this path which Americans are going, and it's not being seen well. And by that, I can assure you, the government of India and the people of India will stand the ground, and they'll do everything possible to protect their national interests whether it's buying oil from Russia, buying defense equipment from Russia, or protecting the agriculture market, and enhancing more cooperation with like-minded countries on BRICS platform or SCO platform. You cannot do that. You can't tell India what to do with this economy. You can't tell what to do with this foreign policy. This is not Europe. I think Americans got spoiled by Europe because Europe just being the vassal states of the US, they do what they're told. As simple as that. And they're expecting similar behavior from India and also Brazil.
Yeah.
Brazil is not standing its ground. They're not going to retreat at all. And this is a new reality of the world. And I think US will have to learn to live with this reality.
It's humiliating. Like the way Europe behaves is humiliating. And yeah, I agree with you. I think he got so accustomed to Europe being vassals that they just kind of assume that the rest of the world would be vassals. We typically don't care about the historical context. We just have objectives that we want to accomplish. And speaking of Peter Navarro, I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on this, but the Modi's War was one of the other things that Lunatic came out with. That Lunatic even went so far as to say that you guys were being, what did he say, arrogant because you cared about your sovereignty. It's like how these arrogant Indians care about their sovereignty. It's just outrageous stuff that is coming out. It's like literally hysterical and shrill, which on some level gets across that they realize that they screwed up. That's my take on that. I'm curious about something else. You mentioned something and made a connection between two things, and I'm glad you did. The SEO and BRICS, and how there's an overlap. There's this kind of enmeshment between these things because many of the same, let's say, the kernel of BRICS is also in the SEO. Now, Lula called for an emergency virtual meeting for BRICS. He's going to be heading it up for this year, or next year, I believe. So they're calling for the emergency meeting. And in context of calling for that emergency meeting, did I get that right? No, he's doing it this year, and it's going to be India next year, correct? Am I getting that right?
Okay. Right, yes. Yeah.
So he called for an emergency meeting. And his thing is we need to respond, and we need to coordinate and work together in regards to dealing with these, effectively a tariff war that Donald Trump is waging on BRICS countries. Now, I don't know why he waited until now to do this. I honestly, God, don't. I don't know why the rest of the world decided that they didn't decide to effectively lump together and function as one in order to kind of push back on this as opposed to just being vassals and picked off individually. But whatever, he's doing it now. I don't know when this is going to take place. I would imagine it's going to take place after the events in China. The celebration is over with, but they're still having bilateral meetings, so it's probably going to take place after that. Give me your take on that. I mean, what is going to be the main? How do you think they're going to push back on this? Because obviously they're huddling to retaliate. It's how do we have a cohesive policy to deal with tariffs? And I love this, by the way. I love it because it's forcing BRICS to come into its own and function as a unit, as opposed to functioning as disparate individual countries that are across the globe. They have to deal with this in unison in a way that they weren't necessarily doing prior. Give me your thoughts, though, on how you think they're going to effectively deal with this.
I think it is part of a larger trend in international affairs. We had the BRICS meeting here, BRICS summit in Rio in July, in which Prime Minister Modi participated. He also had a bilateral with President Lula. President Xi Jinping and President Putin could not participate, and of course, they were very well represented by the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister. But I think most of these tariffs against India going up to 50%, also against Brazil, it happened after the BRICS summit. And I think it has something to do with the success of the BRICS summit in Rio de Janeiro and all the optics of the leaders of some of the biggest countries together. And tariff issue was discussed at the BRICS meeting in Rio de Janeiro. But I think the situation has changed a lot, and I think that is why President Lula is calling for an emergency meeting, because Brazil has the presidency till the end of the year, and then they pass it on to India. I'm sure this meeting will be online meeting and not a physical meeting, but it can happen September, October, or till November, or before that. And I think we can see President Lula with President Xi Jinping, President Putin, President Ramaphosa of South Africa, and other countries, and of course Prime Minister Modi, to discuss this very important issue. I think, Jamal, it's important that the world has learned how to live without US, or they're learning it. And you know what happened? The Brazilian coffee makers, they were facing a huge tariff from America, and the Chinese stepped in and say, okay, we can take almost 50 Brazilian coffee companies to China. And suddenly, and then yesterday, very interestingly, President Xi Jinping said that he wants to open China to Indian products. So if and Chinese have been very supportive of India in the case of tariffs. Same with Russia. I think India and Russia trade is now $68 billion, and they plan to cross it to $100 billion in next few years. There was a meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President Putin in Tianjin yesterday. They spent almost 2 hours together. They spent 1 hour together in the presidential limousine, talking one on one. After that, there's a big meeting between the delegation of two countries. So I think the solution to this tariff war launched by the US is very simple. The emerging countries and the developing world, they want to do more business and trade with each other. If you're losing business with America, you have to find new markets. That's what Indians are doing. Indian exporters are looking for new markets. Also, they'll import from other countries. So this will see actually more cooperation between emerging countries and developing countries. The multipolar world was emerging anyway, organically. I think now that process has been accelerated because everybody finds themselves in a difficult situation, and they have seen through the game. And I can assure you, with Donald Trump or next American president, there's not going to be much change in the US policy of imposing tariffs, forcing other countries to invest in US. What basically you're asking to close down your factories and ship your factories to the US and buy back the products made in US to your country. Are you asking them to invest in the US? Now, country like Europe is doing that. Europe is going to make $750 billion investment in the US. They're going to buy LNG for $600 billion in theory. I don't know. They don't have money to
Yeah, in
invest.
theory. Thank you. Thank you for putting in theory. I'll believe it when I see it.
In theory. Yeah, they must have said this to massage the ego of the US president,
Right.
And plus they're taking 15% tariff. I mean, this is really you. It's like you want to destroy yourself to help your friend. No serious country.
And sorry to interrupt, we're paying 10% on top of the weapons that they're buying, meaning Trump is charging them a 10% premium on every weapon that they buy from the United States.
Yeah. So plus, 750 billion, 600 billion plus weapons. This is more than $2 trillion, and plus tariffs. So you're going to suffer enormously. Okay, and this kind of behavior, I think you shouldn't expect from India or Brazil or China. Russia hasn't suffered any sanctions. I mean, they have sanctions, more than 14,000 sanctions for more than 3 years. So there's no much scope for imposing more sanctions on Russia. So I see a fundamental change. It will be a slow process. Of course, there'll be pain in the short term, because US has the international reserve currency, and in India you have more than $100 billion of trade. So there'll be some short-term pain. There will be loss of jobs or things like that. But I think countries will finally find a solution, because the good thing about, you mentioned SCO and BRICS, so many countries are talking on these platforms. And 25 countries participating in SCO, and BRICS, when it happened in Brazil, was almost 30 countries, BRICS plus, and more countries, they want to join these organizations. It's SCO plus, it's BRICS plus. There's now even a plan to have a SCO bank like the BRICS bank. So
that's right.
I think a truly multipolar world is emerging now. The process has been accelerated, and that is the way forward to dealing with it. And we can't sit and cry about we got hit by so much tariff, this tariff. People have seen through the game. What is the game here? And they know to play this game is at the cost of your national economy, at the cost of your sovereignty, at the cost of the livelihood of your people. No country can do that. So what is the way out? Way out is to do more business with like-minded countries which have the same stand. We stand for cooperation, stand for peace, stand for development and progress for the people, and not these. It's funny that Navarro called it Modi's war, and he said the road to Ukraine goes through New Delhi. The road to Ukraine goes through Washington and Brussels, not through New Delhi.
As for reference, I have the clip. If you want to see the clip, it is. I've been amazed at Navarro. Like, there is a level of mendacity that I think human beings can bear before their back breaks. Navarro doesn't seem to have that level. I thought Donald Trump was a habitual liar. Navarro is astonishing. Listen to him make this argument about this is Modi's war. Now, mind you, the U.S. was directly involved in overthrowing the government of Ukraine. We were directly involved in keeping the war going, putting hundreds of billions of dollars into the war. And Navarro gets out here and says,
it's a lot of
right here.
It happens, of course, is Ukraine comes to us and Europe and says, give us some more money. So everybody in America loses because of what India's doing. The consumers and businesses and everything lose, and workers lose because.
And just to be clear, what India is doing is protecting its workers, its sovereignty, and just not and choosing who their business partners. Meaning, India saying, yes, we're going to purchase this oil. No, we're not going to allow you to destroy our agriculture industry. That's what they're doing. That's what Navarro is talking about. Just want to nail that down. Let's go back.
And says, give us some more money. So everybody in America loses because of what India's doing. The consumers and businesses and everything lose, and workers lose because India's high tariffs cost us jobs and factories and income and higher wages. And then the taxpayers lose because we got to fund Modi's war. Okay. The road to peace runs at least partly right through New Delhi. I mean Modi's war.
Let me ask
because the road to peace runs in part through New Delhi.
Even the journalist was like, what? Like, he was confused by it. I mean, Putin's war? No, Modi's war.
I think more than anything else, Jamal, this is a frustration and desperation, because they are not getting anywhere with India. And they have tried everything, 25% tariff, 50% tariff, Trump not going to Quad summit in India. And the frustration is growing because Indians are not budging, and they will not budge. They're taking a stand, and they'll stand up. So I think this kind of I think for them this is audacious. A country is trying to protect its sovereignty. A country is trying to protect its national interest. Is audacity? No, it's not audacity. It's a normal behavior of any self-respecting country, and the government which is trying to develop and work for its people.
Rational, just rational interest. I don't know what else it is.
And there's interesting. I think it was not Navarro's, some other guy. I think he said, "Oh, the Indian billionaires are making money with Russian oil." a government which only works for billionaire class is accusing the other country is billionaires making money.
Did he say that for real? Like
he said yeah. He said the rich Indians are making money, billionaires making money in India, forgetting that this is what trade is about. Why countries trade with each other, companies, state companies, private companies. That's how international trade works, but fascinating. It looks like it's kind of meltdown happening there, and because they're not really going anywhere with all these pressure tactics.
Yes, like a child jumping in a supermarket because they want a toy and their mama won't give them a toy. It's very weird. I mean, and it's hysterical. It's shrill. I mean, if you have to get on TV and say that, you have to think to yourself, what has gone so wrong that you have to behave that way? That's astonishing. Like, that's a grown man. Effectively, a war that we started. B,
and one more thing.
Yeah, go for it.
No. One more thing. I think you don't do diplomacy in public. These are important issues to be discussed behind closed doors between government officials, between ministers. You don't insult and try to humiliate countries publicly on TV channels. And I remember there's an interview with Bill Clinton with Piers Morgan. I'm not a fan of Clinton, but he said, he was talking about his relationship with President Putin, and he said, Putin kept all his words which he gave to Clinton in private, as long as we did not insult or raise these issues in public. That's how diplomacy is done. The
Yeah.
world leaders talk to each other in private, behind closed doors. That's how they discuss things. You don't run government and do diplomacy through, posting tweets on Twitter or threatening countries, and government declarations on Twitter. That's not really the good way of doing it. Have you ever seen the Prime Minister of India or President of China or Russia doing this?
No.
No, they don't do it. Don't do that. I mean, this is so if you think this social media pressure is going to make a big country like India cave in, I think it's a grossly mistaken view.
Well, you must understand the U.S. takes a certain. Trump has drunk the Kool-Aid of a hegemon. Now, I know a lot of people think that Donald Trump is, quote unquote, accepting the multipolar world, and Donald Trump we're beyond the unipolar. Trump doesn't believe that at all. He's diversifying responsibility to various countries around the globe. So he wants Europe to deal with the Russians, Israel to deal with the Iranians, and the U.S. is going to pivot to China. But that's not the same thing as I'm accepting a multipolar world. This is the U.S. realizing the limits of the U.S. power, and we need to effectively, use other countries kind of like the Romans would use barbarians, because the Roman force was no longer capable of effectively patrolling all of the area that they've effectively taken.
Yeah.
These are very different things. Trump fully believes that as a hegemon, he can just dictate and tell people what to do, and that he doesn't necessarily have to deal with the normal rules of statecraft. He's getting it wrong. And when you're dealing with countries, especially countries now like Russia, China, India, these countries that are huge blocks of the globe, that doesn't work. This is not the 1980s. You can't pull that off. And I think he's finding the hard limits of American power as he bumps his head hard against these elements. So thankfully, I'm glad. I'm happy about this. Time for the world to grow up. Time for America to get its reality check. On some level, this is America getting its reality check. I guess the question now becomes, what do they do? I mean, obviously, when BRICS is going to come together, they're going to coordinate how do we deal with America in a cohesive manner, meaning no more just basic individual countries dealing with America individually. We are going to work as a unit. We're going to work as a group economically in order to deal with this particular issue, to lessen. And yeah, I agree with you. They're probably going to have more trade in their own currencies and everything else. They've been doing that already, though. I get the sense there's going to be something else. I mean, even with the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, you pointed out that security has become a larger part of that organization. And they made a concerted note to nail down this notion of the attacks on Iran were outlandish, and this is not something that could be permitted. Okay. But does the Shanghai Cooperation Organization evolve to acknowledge that the fires that are being set around the globe are in large part to prevent that multipolarity that these organizations are effectively trying to bring into fruition? And is security going to at some point become part of ensuring, like, how can I say this? I'm not saying for a NATO type thing. That's not what I'm talking about. But I'm pointing out that Iran on some level is a fulcrum for that multipolar world. If Iran is damaged or somehow taken out, as Israel tried to do in that decapitation strike, turn it into Syria, then China and Russia would have a much harder time in doing this thing of multipolarity with Iran that has effectively been Libyanized, for lack of a better word for it. Do they realize that? Let's take out BRICS for the moment because they're more of a trading bloc. But the SCO does have a contingent dealing with this notion of security. Does security expand to the individual nations in regards to coming up with a cohesive strategy to keep individual nations secure against predators like the U.S. in this case?
Oh, you're absolutely right. Iran is a very, very important part of the chain, the Eurasian chain, actually. And very interestingly, the final declaration yesterday, it condemned the American attack on Iran, and it also condemned the Israeli attack on Gaza. So there's a big change from the last meeting of SCO. So I think SCO is a security platform. It's not a defense alliance. So I don't see how countries can actually help Iran on the platform of SCO or BRICS platform, because BRICS is also more about economy and finance and development and growth, not in defense alliances. But I think the presence of the Iranian president there yesterday at the SCO meeting and at various platforms like BRICS, it shows that the Iran has the other countries stand with Iran, and how militarily they can help Iran, I don't know, and it's a serious problem because Iran is a soft target at the moment. They have all the allies in the region have been badly hit, including in Yemen. A few days ago, the prime minister and other ministers were killed.
Mm-hmm.
But Iran is also capable of defending itself. We saw, in this when exchange of missiles between Iran and Israel, and Israel was hit pretty hard, and then they ran to Donald Trump asking for help, and then he dropped his bombs on, I don't know, some places and claimed that everything has been destroyed, and it was denied by American officials themselves that the nuclear installations were not destroyed. There was some damage, but not destroyed completely. So I think Iran is a big country, 80 million people. It has pretty well organized armed forces. Of course, they have suffered in the recent months because of the Israeli attacks. But it's a country which is quite capable of defending itself, and it will get support from countries like Russia and China, definitely, because it's an important chain. India and Russia have been trying to build a north-south corridor, a trade corridor, and that goes through Iran. India has invested millions of dollars in a port called Chabad Port in Iran to do business with Iran and also to do business with Afghanistan. So it is a very important country for India too, not just for commercially and trade-wise, but we have historical and cultural relations with Iran going back to hundreds of years. Where basically we speak the same kind of languages, and the culture is very similar. So I think Iran is a very important part of this new emerging. It may not be as strong a pole as India or China and Russia and Brazil, but it is a pole and country also which respects its national interest and its sovereignty, and they're quite capable of defending themselves.
Yeah. One last thing before I let you go. I have to hit Venezuela. Correct me if I'm wrong. Brazil has, or let's say Lula, I go with Lula specifically, has not necessarily been the fondest of Venezuela, or let's say Nicolas Maduro specifically. The United States has lined up several warships right here. The U.S. Navy has assembled a strike package off the coast of Venezuela capable of launching at least 268 Tomahawk cruise missiles, as well as amphibious assault ships capable of landing around 4,000 Marines. Now, this is weird to me because this doesn't necessarily seem like enough to take the entirety of a country, and yet they're loitering out there nonetheless. And, Colombia's president came out, if there's an attack on Venezuela, what we're seeing in Syria and Iraq will become in the greater Colombia region. Shout out to DG Geopolitics. This is where I'm pulling this from, but it's just the news that's bubbling up at this point. Give me your take on this. I mean, what is the thinking in the region about this? The region has to be deeply, deeply bothered by the U.S. treating the South, let's say South America, Latin America, as its backyard, quote unquote, in this kind of imperialist, colonial machinations going after Venezuela. It's outrageous.
Yeah,
and real quick, by the way, just want to add one more thing. Part of the rationale that they're doing this, China and Russia both have been making inroads in Venezuela, even investing millions, if not billions, to exploit the oil in Venezuela for them to pull that oil out of the ground. This is part of the reason and rationale that the United States is now claiming drugs as the reason that they're effectively doing this, with all options being on the table. I'm sorry to interrupt, please.
No, it's okay. I think it's part of the larger, bigger American strategy of securing the entire Western Hemisphere as their area of sphere of influence. It's the Monroe Doctrine on steroids, actually. Now, I mean, there's not been a single war in South America for more than 100 years. I think the last war fought was between Brazil and Paraguay in the late 19th century. And there's not been there was a war in the Falkland Islands between Argentina and the British forces, but also it was a limited, restricted war. I think this is what the U.S. is doing in the waters near Venezuela is a kind of show of its strength, is posturing. They're trying to threaten. They're not trying to just threaten Venezuela. They're also giving message to Brazil. Because the country which is suffering from the highest tariff is Brazil. So I think the whole talk of in the right wing circles or in the U.S. That from Greenland to Panama and below is going to be their area of sphere. And what happens to the rest of the world, they don't really care. So they're fine with the multipolar world, in other parts of the world, but on their terms. That is their strategy. And South America, Latin America is very, very important part of it. It's not just they're threatening military action against drug cartels in Venezuela, but also in Mexico, which shares border with US, and Mexico, Mexico was on the verge of joining BRICS. And so this is a very complicated scenario. I think this is all, the US foreign policy and European foreign policy has become reactionary. They no longer set the agenda. They react. And this new world order, they're reacting to it because they're not able to influence other countries with their policies, with economic assistance, in any form. So Venezuela was about to join BRICS. It didn't happen because it's a complicated relations with Brazil at the moment. But I don't think any country, probably Argentina under Javier Milei may support it. I don't think any country in the region will support an attack on this is not Panama. So you're talking about Venezuela. They attack Panama and kidnap the president. This is not going to happen.
Noriega.
So, saying Reagan, it was Reagan's time, right? Venezuela has a good military. They have Sukhoi 30 fighter jets. They have S-300 missiles. So they're quite capable of doing a damage to. And you don't take over a country like Venezuela with 4,000 with few ships and all that. I think this is a show of his strength, to the domestic audience in Florida. There are many factors involved here. But I won't say it's not a threat. The threat is real. They can do covert operations, other things can do damage to. They've been after Venezuela for almost 20 years, more than 20 years, sanctions. And Venezuela has one of the highest reserves of petroleum in the world, crude oil. And the economy has become dysfunctional because of sanctions. So if a country, and this is what they love, if a country has its resources, but they can't use resources for its people, but only to enrich the petroleum companies from the West, that's what they want. And if you don't do that, you face sanctions, military threats, attacks, covert operations, name it, everything possible. So this is what's happening. It's a serious situation, but I don't think a full-blown military invasion of Venezuela is out of the question. Americans don't have the capacity, I'm sorry to say that, to send in ground troops anywhere in the world. Not to Iran, not to Ukraine, not to Venezuela.
Especially
it's just not possible. They can throw in missiles, what they did in Iran, throw in missiles, attack, damage, from the safety of distance, drones and all that, but to a ground invasion, out of the question.
Yeah, it made no sense. I just didn't get it. I mean, the other thought was, I think Guyana is the name of the country that borders Venezuela with this kind of border dispute. And of course, the U.S. tend to use border disputes as a rationale to get further ensconced into provoking conflicts. And so is it possible that the 4,000 troops are there to back up whatever Guyana is doing? Like, this was always confusing to me. I was like, what is 4,000 troops going to do? And what are you going to do? Just murder people with Tomahawk missiles? Otherwise, why are they there? And as you point out, they're there as a threat and as a signal, even though how they will become actionable is unclear at this point. So, Shobhan, you are fantastic, man. You always get the best breakdowns. You have a fantastic way of explaining this stuff. I can see why you are a journalist and why you are presenting this information. You do it very well. Thank you for this. I really appreciate it. And just so the audience would know who you are one more time, Shobhan Saxena. He's an Indian journalist based out of Sao Paulo. Great food, Sao Paulo, by the way. Great food. Oh, great food. Sao Paulo, Brazil. In a career spanning more than 30 years, he has reported for the Times of India, the Hindu, the Indian Express, various other publications in India. Right now, he is an international correspondent for DD India, the international channel of India's public broadcaster. You be safe, and you have a fantastic rest of your day, okay?
Thank you very much. Thanks. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, Jamal.
Thanks, man.